about your first piece?
I started this whole series over here. This was actually the first one that, this is the junk boat brooch. And I started working with forms of hulls, traditional sailing ships, and the sails. In this one, it was the first where I took the clinker-built hulls and started to make them into segments and into interesting shapes and interacting with sails. So this was the piece that started off this entire thesis. After this, I did another piece, and that's this bracelet over here. And this is worn like this. Put your hand through it. Okay, and so this was the second piece in the series. And at this point, I'm still using very square ends and square attachments for the sail. Actually, they're called hanks. So this is the second piece in the series. And from there, I started onto the bending bracelets. And one of the properties of the 3D printed nylon is that when it's really thin, it's very flexible. So I used that flexibility here to create clasps and a way of attaching the bracelet to your wrist, for instance here, and then this gets just hooked onto the little dragon's head, like that. And there is the bracelet. So this is the second one in the series. This was the first. So the sail here is attached by this little knotwork, and the knotwork actually acts as a hinge so that it could spin around. And to make it into a bracelet, you would attach it there. But to have it be just an object that sits on, that just, sits down, you can attach the sail into a different spot, and it looks like a little sailboat riding the waves.
Horse heads sort of in there.
This is the only piece where I cut the hulls down into smaller segments and use them. I really wanted to have more emphasis on the hull forms rather than the water, and there's an ambiguity there that happens with the hull forms and the sails that gives people the impression of water. And the third one has multiple sails here, as well as I started to change the details from square to more traditional block winches. And this one is where I started to take the dragon imagery from the Viking ships and use the tail as well as the head. I started to also just work with sails and hulls, and that's with the flying jib bracelet. This is actually more of an arm piece. It's very large. But this one's kind of fun because in this one I was thinking of the images of multiple jibs on these sailing ships. So then from there, I started to work with multiple pieces and creating using different color schemes and putting them together using tubing. I was using the tubing all along on the pieces, but in this one I started to really think about the idea of stringing the sails onto these spars in different ways, and then using the different components for different dyeing schemes. It's hand dyed. It's made from 3D printed nylon or glass-filled polyamide. So from there I started to think about the movement that I could achieve and perhaps create larger pieces, and specifically neck pieces. So I was thinking about linkages, and that's where this piece comes into play. And here I finally take the hulls and start using the planking in a more traditional hull, more visually recognizable. So this one also has the tail of a dragon ship as well as the head, although this is a very cute dragon. He's not terribly fierce. So from there I was also working on some smaller pieces that could work as earrings that I wanted to do as sets. So with those, I have the dragon from the front of the ship. It goes right here. And this actually loops over the top of your ear and hangs like that. And because these were so small, and I wanted to display them in multiples and show the different ways that I can dye these 3D printed materials, I also printed it in a more translucent material. This is Duris White. It's a photopolymer, and we printed this here at school. And then, of course, using a computer program, it's easy enough to just do a command like mirror and create one for the other. Which is where we have the stern of the ship with the tail. And again, I did these in different colors. And I do have one photopolymer here. This is Vericlear, and this one was only printed last week actually. So at this point, I decided to go much larger for the brooch, and I have been playing with one piece all along, which was based on the Oseberg boat that they found in Norway. And this actually looks nothing like the Oseberg boat, but believe it or not, the original lines of that are what inspired this, specifically around the bow. And then I wanted to have it seem as if it was flying. So the dragon the hull becomes wings and the sails just come across it. It's a very large brooch. And again, I continue to use the tips. The tips are all lost wax cast. I made a mold from 3D printed originals, and I cast multiples of them, dozens and dozens, to use on all these pieces. The tubing is standard sterling silver that I planned for using the 3D prints. What is on is there's a pin that pulls out, and then it goes through there's a hole here. You would pin it to yourself and then attach it on the other side. And in the meantime, there's a small little nub there that goes into a track inside and then locks. That's actually called a bayonet clasp, or a brooch pin. This is a giant brooch pin, so it had to be a secure. So from here, I go to the last two pieces, which, one of the really fun things about, I find fun anyway, about taking the MFA here at Tyler, is I had to take art history every single semester. And last semester and this semester, we covered some Egyptian art. And I did a report at the end of last semester on the jewelry of King Tut. And the forms of the way the pectoral collars were assembled is something that really inspired me to want to create a piece that had that kind of pattern, structure, and movement. So here, this comes apart. You can see how easily it moves. It hinges around with the tubing, and it lays very nicely around your neck when you put it on. But it also is a little tricky to put back on the stand, so that's why I only take it off part way. So this was the 11th piece in my 12-piece thesis. And the very last piece is, again, I took the Oseberg hull, which I duplicated in my Rhino program, and I would take the lines and the shapes off of the Oseberg hull, and I would twist them and move them around and create new surfaces. This piece is, again, the 3D printed nylon, the glass-filled polyamide, and also using gold-plated steel parts. And then one of these parts actually is done with gold leaf over nylon. And I'm not going to tell you which. But I did find that gold leaf is a lot of fun.